It seems like Jesus' earliest followers use his presence/arrival as a token of war from the very beginning. Is every generation bound to misinterpret Jesus for some holy war?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great question. I think the disciples are kind of caught up in the moment. So I think they do have a little bit more aware of Jesus, that he's not going to be that. I think where the disciples really fall short is that moment when Jesus is arrested. Most of the Gospels are like, one of them attacks, the guards. John is like, actually, it was Peter that did it. But like, that's the moment where they're like, okay, we're with you on this peace path, but now they're going to arrest you. And now we have to jump in. And I think that's a really interesting piece for all of us to reflect on. It's probably easy for a lot of us here in this room, for me, to say, I'm not going to support war. I can't do that. I can't get behind it. Less easy for me to look at the moments where I see real injustice in front of me, real injustice happening to someone that I care about, and to find the line where I say, I'm going to stand up to that, I'm going to push back against that, but I'm not going to slip into using violence to get my way in that. And I think that's where it really becomes real for all of us. Now, yes, I think every generation is absolutely predisposed to use Jesus as a talisman to support their own violent ambition, because that's what we do as human beings. And the call of Jesus does not eliminate that in any of us. I think it is the long, slow process of sanctification for an entire lifetime of following the way of Jesus that it takes for us to really let go of that kind of belief that we can use evil, we can use violence to get to something good. And so this is why it's so hard. It's always been hard for every generation of Christianity, including ours, because it's not obvious. And it takes a lifetime of listening and following, pursuing peace, walking in the way of grace until it actually becomes something that we do instinctively. And I don't think it's instinctive for myself yet. I've been on this path a long time. I think it's still something I have to call myself back to. So I have a lot of compassion for that. I see how hard it is. I see how hard it continues to be for all of us. But no matter how far down that path I've moved, I think that image of the disciples at the last moment, being there with him and then saying, oh, but I can't still be peaceful now, can I? I think that's the one that keeps me holding to account to say there's probably some breaking point where I couldn't do it either. But if I keep on that path and I keep naming that and I keep moving toward that, then maybe when that test comes in my life, I'll pass it too. And if I don't, I'll trust that God is there with grace for me anyway. So thoughts? I don't know. What do you think?
I think at best, I have an intuition about this. I appreciated you being willing to say, like, I think probably we would all come to a place where the conception of what we feel faithfulness to Christ is, where it would crack when peace is the only way forward. I think we have to be honest with ourselves. And I'm not interested in, sometimes you'll hear people, they'll like manufacture a scenario. Yeah, but what if you face this? I'm not interested in those hypotheticals. What I want to do is I want to ground myself in Christ's way and just be humble enough to say, I'm pretty sure I might crack. So, Jerry, I appreciate that. This, just my intuition, because I just tend to go to history. In the first 3 centuries of the Christian story and the Christian followers, we know that there was this impulse towards choosing the peaceful way. So we know that we have these examples where people served, they were in Roman imperial army service, and they chose, when they would convert, they choose to just step away from that service. We know that there were instances where people were a little bit troubled about having to participate in civic life, but we don't have a ton of examples. What we do know is that when Christianity was sort of taken by the Emperor Constantine and those that followed after him, and taken as the mechanism, and this is where Jesus gets taken as the mechanism by which we will succeed, by which we will move up and to the right, by which we will have victory over our enemies. That's where we fail. That's where we misconstrue what Jesus is saying in this story, in all these parables of grace. And so this is, my intuition is like, how do we do what Christian generations always struggle to do? It's like, well, let me ground myself again in how Jesus didn't come. He never said he was going to take me up and to the right. He never even said that I'd have victory over my enemies. All he said is that he'd be with me to the end of days. And he commissioned me to go and to be an instrument of peace, to be one of the blessed ones who's a peacemaker. Again, not a trajectory that's up and to the right. And to me, I think, I gotta keep reminding myself of what Jesus actually said. This is why these parables series are so important for us. It's why we do them intentionally, because we need it. We need to keep coming back. It's like, no, let's look at what Jesus said, and let's not let what someone says about Jesus and how they might use his story to take us up into the right. And let's realize, as this week will show us, unlike any other time in the year, that the journey is one of descent. And that's the only way, by facing our own loss, by facing our own travesty, our own failure. What do we trust? We trust that Christ goes with us into that darkness and will meet us on the other side.
There's a phrase, Henry Nouwen uses it, and he uses the phrase downward mobility of Christ, right? And it's a phrase I hold on to all the time. Like, that's what the Christian life is. It's the downward mobility of Christ. Whatever we think it is, it's not up and to the right. It's down and to the left. Maybe we could say that. I'll say this. You mentioned this. Last thing here. That idea of people constructing hypothetical arguments where then would violence be okay? So I don't claim to be a pacifist. I claim to want to be a pacifist. But I've had this where people are like, what if this was going to happen? Here's the thing. If you constantly fantasize theoretical scenarios where you get to use violence, then slowly the gap between you and violence will slowly close. Yes, there might be a moment where I would break on my convictions and I would do something I would regret. Of course there is. But I don't want to dwell on those moments and give myself permission where it's going to come. I want to say, no, I'm going to focus on the peace in front of me. And pacifism in that sense doesn't just mean not carrying a gun around. It means the way that I treat people, the way that I act with people, the way that I carry peace around me all the time. And every time I fantasize about the moment where I get to not live up to my ideals, it's going to make it a little bit easier to not live up to my ideals in a conversation with one of you. And I think that's what we do. We actually focus on the real life in front of us. Where is Jesus? Where is the peace in that? What is he calling us to right now? I love what you're talking about. So.